How should we be responding to the darkness around us? It's with us at all times. How should we respond to this present darkness? In Paul's letter to the Romans in chapter 13, he deals with this subject in verses 11 through 14. I want to pick up verse 14 where he says, instead of being engaged in the sin and the spiritual sleepiness of the age, we ought to be people that behave right. Then he says, rather clothe yourselves with the Lord Jesus Christ and do not think about how to gratify the desires of the flesh. What's he saying? Clothe yourselves with Christ. Put on Christ as an external garment. That I think this is the armor of the Lord in Ephesians 6. The helmet of salvation, the shield of faith, the breastplate of righteousness, even or to put on the fruit of the Spirit, which is Christ. Love, joy, peace, gentleness, self-control. And he's saying, put on Christ. Put him on display. I had someone ask me, what do you want your legacy to be? I said, I want it to be that Christ was magnificent, that I displayed a magnificent Christ. Put him on display, not under a bushel, not hidden. And then he says, don't make, the old King James said, provision, or don't think of ways to gratify the flesh, the sin nature we have. Christians have sin remaining in them, but sin is not to reign over us. Romans 6 says that. Sin is not to be a king, not a lord over the believer, for we've been freed from sin while it still remains within us. So we still have to figure out ways to cope with sin. And three ways sin approaches a believer. It approaches him through his emotional life, through strong desires, and then the will. Will I do it or will I not? And we have to learn how to cope with ourselves. We must know ourselves. They used to have at Niagara Falls, they had a place on the falls way upstream that said no swimming beyond this point, no boating beyond this point. You had to know at what point you had to get out of the water, get to the side, because the current is going to take over. And all of us as human beings, we have moods, we have emotions, we have things that create strong desires. And if we don't watch it, we'll do the deed. He's saying, flee temptation, be aware. Don't be giving yourselves those provisions and those facilitators to your sin nature. You know when you're susceptible to sensuality, and so your eye gate, you can give yourself intake by vision that will just stimulate desires that are no good for you and that will lead you to sin. He's saying, be wise, be wise. You know you should not go around certain areas, old habitats, old hangouts, maybe old friends. You must be careful. In a world full of darkness, they want to trip you up and get you to fall. He said, think, be clear, make no provision for the flesh or the sin nature in you. Only make provision to put Christ on display. Is Christ on display today? Or are you planning and scheming how to do a work of the flesh? Flee it, flee it. Look to Christ.